What if I told you anyone can write a plot that's irresistible? Well, the truth is you can. It really comes down to structuring your plot in a way that keeps readers interested. In part one of this two-part video series looking at irresistible plot structures, we got as far as the game-changing midpoint. But the midpoint isn't the finish line, it's the pivot. The question now is, how do you carry momentum all the way to a satisfying climax? How do you make sure readers don't toss your book across the room after chapter 12? Think of it like this. The midpoint is your character's wait, what moment. It's the moment everything changes, and your job as a writer now is to ride that tension all the way to the story's ultimate emotional payoff. If you're wondering how to write a book that keeps readers hooked, this is where the magic happens. In this video, we'll explore how your protagonist responds to the twist, faces escalating opposition, and experiences transformation. These are the beats that turn a good story into a story readers just can't put down. By the end, you'll understand the flow from false hope to disaster and ultimately to victory, all while learning storytelling tips for writers you can apply to your own craft. After the game-changing midpoint comes the post-midpoint action hero. It's another mouthful, I know. This is where the hero reacts to the game-changing midpoint and approaches the goal from a new angle. After that midpoint plot twist, your protagonist must revise their plan. This is like a second inciting incident, but with raised stakes. Whatever they've done to this point hasn't worked. They're pushed further out of their comfort zone, and now they're forced to improvise. Suddenly, yesterday's clever idea seems laughably inadequate. As I say, this helps raise the stakes, something I tend to kind of bang on about. But the effect is to send an engaged reader off following your main character in search of a new resolution, one they didn't know they'd have to go and find, and they keep reading. To find your post-midpoint action hero, ask yourself, what is my protagonist's new plan, and how do they think it will work? How are they still trying to avoid fear while pursuing their desire? This is where novel writing advice can really kick in. A protagonist who adapts, feels alive. For writers learning how to start writing a book or writing for beginners, this moment is key. A story must evolve as the character does. Plot and character grow together, one pushing the other. Here's a practical tip. Let your protagonist fail. Really, let him have to improvise and make messy decisions. Nothing hooks a reader more than watching someone figure things out in real time. No Deus Ex Machina though. No helicopters dropping down out of nowhere to pluck your main character out of the mess. They got in there. They have to get themselves out. Bonus points if you add a touch of humor or some self-doubt. The second pinch point. Now the opposition gets closer. Even if your story doesn't have a traditional villain, the second pinch point ramps up pressure. Whatever that vital conflict, again, you're raising the stakes. Maybe an ally betrays the protagonist, or a deadline looms, or an internal misbelief resurfaces. The stakes rise, and the reader begins to feel tension tighten. To identify your second pinch point, you can ask yourself, how can I show the looming opposition which is now threatening to derail the protagonist's goals? If you're exploring how to write fiction, the second pinch point demonstrates how pacing and escalation can create momentum. This is where your story really comes alive. Show, don't tell. Remember, let the threat feel real, persistent, personal. You want the kind of obstacle that keeps readers flipping pages at 2 a.m. The supposed victory. This is the moment of false hope. At some point, the protagonist experiences apparent success. Everything seems to be working. Maybe they solved a minor problem or gained a key ally. They even start thinking that they're about to achieve true happiness. It looks like things are going to be okay. This is your chance to practice a gem I've discovered in novel writing. You contrast tension with relief. False hope makes the upcoming disaster sting all that much harder. To generate a good supposed victory, you could ask, why does the protagonist believe they're winning? What creates a sense of hope here for them? Now we come to the unforeseen disaster. This is where everything goes wrong. That victory was completely false. Here's where you can root the disaster in the protagonist's greatest fear and misbelief. Everything they relied on collapses. Plans fail, allies falter, and the one thing they were clinging to slips through their fingers. The stakes aren't just external now, they're deeply personal. To identify your unforeseen disaster, you could ask, how does this disaster target my protagonist personally? How does it force them to confront their fear? For those figuring out how to plan a novel, this is the moment you can weave all the threads of plot, and theme, and character together. Disaster is not random chaos. It's designed to reveal growth opportunities and emotional truths. Next comes the dark moment. Everything here looks hopeless. Your protagonist seems absolutely helpless. She hits rock bottom, confused, lost, broken, unsure which way to turn. She's faced her worst fears and lost. This is the lowest point of their journey, the emotional nadir where everything feels futile. To identify the dark moment in your plot, ask yourself, what does utter hopelessness look like for my character? How does it set up the aha moment, which you know is coming? Something to keep in mind. This is when learning how to write a novel, novices can stumble. It's tempting to skip the dark moment. Don't. Readers need that moment of despair to make the triumph feel earned. Show the raw human side, tears, pig-headed stupidity, stubbornly incorrect plans. Now it's time for renewed hope. We get to the aha moment. Somewhere in the darkness, your protagonist realizes how their fear and misbelief have sabotaged them in confronting their myopia by dealing with what's been quietly holding them back and maybe landed them in the soup in the first place. They discover the answer. Suddenly they see the path forward. This is the aha moment. It's the shift from reactionary hero to proactive problem solver. Your aha moment may show up spontaneously for you, but if it doesn't, ask, what lesson does the protagonist learn here? And how will they overcome their fear and misbelief? The aha moment doesn't have to be flashy. Often it's a quiet internal shift, a recognition that makes the climactic confrontation believable and satisfying. Now comes the showdown, the climactic confrontation. The protagonist confronts his greatest external challenge of the story. He puts into action what he learned in the aha moment. It could be internal, but often by now, at least in genre fiction like my books, the internal battle is largely won, but the external stakes test their transformation. You can find your climactic confrontation by asking, how does the protagonist prove their growth and courage? How do they finally face what terrified them? In writing a book, you'll learn that the climax is where narrative structure, pacing, and character arcs converge. A strong climax is never just action for action's sake. It's the emotional payoff readers have been waiting for. Finally, we get to victory. Victory doesn't mean perfection. It's where the protagonist wins. It means she experiences personal triumph, fear confronted, misbelief shattered, growth undeniable. You can identify victory in your plot by asking, how has my protagonist changed as a result of their journey? How is this transformation clear to the reader? In writing a novel, this is the moment to reward readers for their emotional investment. Show that your protagonist has evolved, learned something meaningful, or gained a sense of agency. Finally, in our resolution, you tie up remaining plot threads, answer questions raised along the way. If it's a series, you can have a subtle cliffhanger if you want, but the main journey should feel complete. In generating your resolution, you can ask yourself, which subplots need closure? Which questions are still lingering? This is the part newer writers often stumble with. The temptation is to rush. Don't. The resolution is your chance to leave readers satisfied, reflecting on the journey and eager for your next story. So to review this second video in this two-part series of how to write an unputdownable story, you revise your protagonist's plan after the midpoint, escalate opposition and tension with a second pinch point, lead the protagonist to false hope, disaster, and rock bottom. Then deliver the aha moment, climactic confrontation, and personal victory. And finally, you wrap up loose ends satisfyingly. These beats help create a narrative arc that keeps readers invested from the first word to the last. Writers exploring how to write fiction, writing craft for novelists, or simply figuring out how to write your first book, I think will find this structure helpful. Which story structure do you personally find most satisfying? Do you love a twist-filled roller coaster or a slow burn that rewards patience? Comment below and let me know. And if you're writing your own story, think about where your midpoint twist will change everything. Remember, learning how to write a novel and applying this structure isn't just theory. It's the difference, I think, between a book that gathers dust and one that readers can't put down.